Think about the first 10 minutes of your morning. You wake up, and before your eyes are even fully open, you reach for your phone. You read a text from your sister. You scroll a headline about something happening on another continent. You hear a podcast voice in your earbuds explaining inflation. You mumble good morning to your partner. You ask your smart speaker about the weather. You read the label on your oat milk. You catch yourself thinking, in full sentences, about what you need to say in your 9 a.m. meeting. All of that is language. Every single piece of it. Now I want you to do something uncomfortable. Strip it all away. Take away the phone. Take away the text. Take away the headline. Take away the podcast. Take away the partner's voice. Take away the smart speaker. Take away the label. Take away your own inner monologue narrating your morning. Take away the meeting. Take away the words for meeting and weather and inflation and good morning. What's left? A body, a heartbeat, hunger, the feeling of cold air on your skin, the sight of another person across the room, and a sound coming out of your throat that nobody on earth has agreed on the meaning of yet. That's where this story starts. Not with the first word. Words come later. The story starts before there was a single sound on this planet that meant anything specific. Here's the trap most of us fall into when we think about ancient humans learning to speak. We picture a caveman grunting, then one day, accidentally saying rock, and everyone going, "Oh, rock." Like language got invented one Tuesday afternoon by a clever guy with a big forehead. That's not what happened. That was never going to be what happened. Language didn't get invented. Language got assembled, slowly, out of body parts that were already doing other jobs, over a period of time so long it makes your brain itch. So tonight we're going to do this differently. Instead of asking, when did humans start talking? Which is the wrong question, we're going to take speech apart piece by piece. We're going to look at the throat, the breath, the tongue, the ear, the brain, the hands, the face, and the group. 8 components. And for each one, I want you to forget what you think the word speech means. Because to our ancestors, speech wasn't what you think it is. Speech wasn't a thing you spoke. It was a thing you became. Let's start with the throat. Because the throat is where the strangest part of the whole story lives. You have, sitting low in your neck, a little structure called the larynx. You probably know it as the voice box. In almost every other mammal on the planet, the larynx sits high up, close to the base of the skull. That's a great design. It lets an animal breathe and swallow at the same time, which means a deer can drink from a stream while still pulling air in through its nose. It's safe. It's efficient. It's the design evolution arrived at over hundreds of millions of years. Somewhere along our lineage, that design broke. Our larynx dropped. It slid down the throat into a position so low that it created a long, open, resonant chamber above it, the pharynx. And that chamber is what lets you produce the full range of vowel sounds. Ah, e, o, oo. You cannot make those sounds cleanly with a high larynx. You need that descended throat. Here's the part that should stop you. That drop did not happen because evolution wanted us to talk. Evolution doesn't want anything. The drop happened, and it came with a serious cost. With the larynx that low, food and air share the same intersection at the back of your throat, which is why you, a member of the only species on Earth that can choke to death on a grape, are walking around with a throat designed like a bad highway interchange. Every other mammal solved this problem. We unsolved it. And we unsolved it because somewhere along the line, the benefits of that resonant chamber outweighed the cost of occasionally killing ourselves on dinner. That tells you something important. Before we ever said a meaningful word, before grammar, before nouns, before names, our bodies were already betting on sound. Sound mattered enough to be worth dying for. Now hold that thought and let's move down. Below the throat, the breath. You don't think of breathing as part of language, but it's the engine of the whole thing. Try this. Take a normal breath in. Now let it out the way you would if you were sighing. Quick, maybe 2 seconds. Now take another breath in, and this time talk. Say a long sentence. Say, I went down to the river yesterday and I saw 3 deer at the edge of the water and they didn't run when they saw me. Count how long that exhale lasted, probably 6 or 7 seconds. maybe longer. That's not a normal exhale. That's a controlled exhale. You just micro-adjusted the muscles between your ribs and the muscles in your diaphragm hundreds of times per second to release air at exactly the rate your voice box needed. You did it without thinking. You've been doing it since you were a toddler. No other great ape does this. A chimp's breathing locks to its movement. When a chimp runs, it breathes in a fixed rhythm tied to its stride. It can't override that, which means a chimp physically cannot give a 4-minute speech. Not because it doesn't have the ideas, because it doesn't have the breath control. Somewhere in our line, the nerves running from the brain to the diaphragm and the rib muscles got thicker. The spinal canal that houses those nerves widened, and when you look at fossil spines, you can actually measure that. Neanderthals, them too. Earlier hominins like Homo erectus, much less so. So before the first word, our bodies had already learned how to lie about breath, how to release air slowly, in patterns, in bursts, in held silences. To them, breath wasn't oxygen. Breath was a tool. Breath was the first instrument any human ever played. Let's keep going inward. The tongue. You think your tongue is for taste and chewing. To an ancient human, the tongue was the most precise muscle in the body, and most of its precision had nothing to do with food. Your tongue can hit, by some counts, more than 40 distinct positions to shape the sounds of language. The tip behind your top teeth gives you T and D and N. The body of the tongue pressed against the roof gives you K and G. The sides curling gives you L. The middle arching gives you the difference between C and she. You do all of this thousands of times an hour, and you have no idea you're doing it. Now here's the reframe. To our ancestors, the tongue wasn't a taste organ. It was a sculptor. It carved air. They didn't know that's what they were doing. There was nobody around to say linguistics to, but their tongues were learning to shape breath into specific, repeatable, recognizable patterns. And the children of those ancestors were watching. They were watching mouths. They were watching lips. They were imitating the way every human child still does. And this is the part that gets me. For thousands of generations before there was anything formal to imitate, imagine the first child who got a sound right. Not a word, just a sound. A sound their parent made, copied perfectly, back at them. Imagine the look on the parent's face. We have no idea when that happened. We can guess it was hundreds of thousands of years ago. But that moment, that look, is where everything we're doing tonight, you and me, started move outward. The ear. You can't have speech without listening. And here's where it gets strange. Human ears are tuned, very specifically, to the exact frequency range of the human voice. Between roughly 2,000 and 4,000 hertz, your hearing is sharper than it has any business being. Sharper than your hearing for low rumbles. Sharper than your hearing for high whistles. Your ear has a sweet spot, and the sweet spot is shaped like us. This didn't happen by accident. The bones inside the middle ear, the malleus, the incus, the stapes, those tiny 3 bones, they changed shape across our evolutionary line in ways that improved sensitivity in that exact band. And in some Neanderthal skulls, researchers have reconstructed the inner ear and found the same tuning. Which means whatever Neanderthals were doing with their voices, they were also tuned to listen for it. They weren't grunting at each other in a cave. They were listening to each other, carefully. But here's where you have to redefine a word. To us, listening means receiving information. To them, listening was something more dangerous. Listening was survival. The ear that could pick out a voice from a windstorm was the ear that could pick out a predator's breath. The ear that could distinguish your mother's voice from a stranger's at 50 paces was the ear that kept you alive. So when we talk about hearing speech, remember, long before that ear evolved to hear words, it evolved to hear other humans, against weather and animals and silence and the dark. The voice came after the ear was already hungry for it. Now we go up. The brain. This is the part that everyone wants to talk about, and it's also the part that's hardest to pin down. Somewhere on the left side of your brain, there's a region called Broca's area. It handles speech production. Behind your ear, on the same side, there's Wernicke's area. It handles speech understanding. When you damage either one, very specific things go wrong. With Broca's, you understand what people say, but you can't get words out, or the ones that come out are broken. With Wernicke's, you produce fluent strings of sound, but they don't mean anything. These regions exist in other primates. They're just smaller, and the connections between them are weaker. In our line, those connections got thicker. There's a bundle of nerve fibers called the arcuate fasciculus running between Broca's and Wernicke's, and in humans, it's a superhighway. In chimps, it's a country road. That difference, that thick white matter cable, is one of the strongest physical signatures of a brain built for language. But here's the reframe, and this is the one that flips things. To our ancestors, the brain wasn't a thinking organ in the way you mean it. They didn't sit around having thoughts in language. They couldn't. Before language, you can't think in language. Their inner experience was probably something more like ours when we're driving on autopilot, and we suddenly arrive home and don't remember the last 5 minutes. Sensory, wordless, image-based, emotional, vivid, but uncaptioned. And then slowly, captions started appearing. That's what language did to the inside of a human head. It didn't replace the wordless inner world. It overlaid it. It gave it handles. You can still find the wordless world if you look. In dreams, in grief, in music, in the moment right before you fall asleep. That's the older brain underneath. Language is the newer layer. So when you ask, when did humans start talking? What you're really asking is, when did the inside of a human head get loud? And the honest answer is, we don't know exactly. The evidence suggests it built up gradually over hundreds of thousands of years. Not a single Tuesday. A long, quiet, slow turning up of the volume inside. We've done throat, breath, tongue, ear, brain. We're not done, because the next part is the one people forget. The hand. You probably weren't expecting hands in a video about speech. Watch yourself the next time you're on a phone call, not a video call, a regular voice-only call. Look at your free hand. It's moving, it's gesturing. To no one. The person on the other end can't see you, and you're still doing it. Why? Because hands and speech share the same neural neighborhood. The part of your brain that controls fine hand movement sits right next to the part that controls fine mouth movement. When one fires, the other often fires too. And there's a serious theory, held by a number of researchers, that human language didn't start as sound at all. It started as gesture, as pointing, as mimicking, as showing. Think about it from the inside of an ancient day. You're trying to tell your group where the herd went. You can't say north. There's no word. But you can point. You can sweep your arm. You can mimic the animal, its shape, its gait. You can use your face. And someone watching you understands. Not perfectly, but enough. And then, gradually as you gesture, you start making sounds too. The sounds aren't the message yet. The hands are the message. The sounds are emphasis. Then, somewhere across thousands of years, the weight shifts. The sounds start carrying more. The hands start carrying less. And eventually you can close your eyes and still understand someone, because the message has fully migrated into the voice. That migration is invisible in the fossil record. We can't dig up a gesture, but you can still see the leftovers. You gesture to no one on a phone call, because 12,000 generations ago, your great-great-great-great-great and on grandmother needed her hands to be understood. The hands never fully left. They just got demoted. Now the face. You have in your face more independent muscles than almost any other animal on the planet. Most mammals have a face that does about 3 things: alert, threatened, calm. Your face between your eyebrows and your lips alone can produce hundreds of distinct expressions. You can lift one eyebrow without the other. You can smile with just the corners of your mouth, or with your whole face, including the muscles around your eyes. And other humans, instantly, without thinking, can tell which one is fake. That facial complexity isn't a bonus feature. It's part of the conversation. When you talk to someone in person, you're not just receiving their words. You're reading their face in real time. A raised eyebrow says, "Really?" A tightened lip says, "I'm not sure." A softening around the eyes says, "I'm with you." You're processing all of this on a parallel track to the words themselves. The words are the headline. The face is the article. Our ancestors had this too. Probably more than we do in some ways, because they couldn't lean on words. Before there was a word for danger, there was a face that meant danger. Before there was a word for I love you, there was a face that meant it. Sound wrote in on top of expression. The face was there first. Which means, and here's a reframe that stings a little. When you send someone a text message and they read it wrong, that's not their failure. That's 200,000 years of evolutionary tuning ripped out. You stripped the face off the message. You stripped the breath. You stripped the tongue and the throat and the ear and the gesture. You sent letters on a screen and asked them to do the job that an entire body used to do. And then you got frustrated that it didn't land right. To an ancient human, that wouldn't be a conversation. It would barely register as communication. Clean didn't mean smelling fresh. Clean meant safe. And to them, communication didn't mean exchanging information. Communication meant being in the same air, the same fire, the same breath, the same eye contact. So if you would have walked into their world with your modern habits, your texts, your emails, your one-word replies, your earbuds in, they wouldn't see you as advanced. They would see you as something closer to ghostly. A person who has somehow lost most of the channels that make a person a person. You would be the strange one. This is the flip. This is the part of the story where you have to stop thinking of ancient humans as the primitive ones. They had the full instrument. They had throat, breath, tongue, ear, brain, hand, face, and one more component we haven't covered yet, the most important one. The group language is not a solo act. You cannot invent language alone. You cannot speak alone in any meaningful sense and have it count as language. Language requires at least two people who agree, even loosely, on what a sound means. And to agree on what a sound means, you need a group that sees each other often enough, lives together long enough, and trusts each other enough to build that agreement over years, over generations. We think the evidence suggests that the deep roots of language are tied to the deep roots of cooperation, to group sizes that got big enough to require more than gesture, to shared tasks like hunting, like firekeeping, like raising children together, like burying the dead. Once a group is large and tight enough that you need to coordinate beyond what eye contact can carry, sound starts doing real work. Sound starts being worth the cost of that dropped larynx. Sound starts being worth the rewiring of the brain. To them, a word wasn't a label. A word was a treaty, a small, repeated, breath-shaped agreement between people who had to live with each other. Fire wasn't a noun. Fire was a promise that when you said that sound, the other person would look in the right direction. That's an enormous amount of trust to compress into one breath. Multiply that trust by every word in their vocabulary, and you get something that is much closer to a relationship than a dictionary. Modern English has roughly 170,000 words in active use. Each one of them is a tiny inherited treaty. You didn't sign any of them. You were born into them. The agreements were already there, made by people you'll never meet, on continents you've never visited, in centuries you can't picture. When you say water, you're keeping a promise made before writing existed. So when did ancient humans actually learn to speak? The honest answer is they didn't, not the way you mean it. They didn't learn, they became. They became throats that could resonate. They became lungs that could lie about breath. They became tongues that could sculpt air. They became ears that could find each other in the dark. They became brains that could caption the wordless world. They became hands that could draw shapes in space. They became faces that could carry meaning before sound arrived. And they became groups that could trust each other enough to make a sound stick. That's the whole story. Not one moment. Not one Tuesday. A slow assembling, across hundreds of thousands of years, of a creature that could finally do the strangest trick on Earth. Take a thought from inside one skull and place it, mostly intact, inside another skull, using nothing but vibrating air. And here's the last reframe, the one I want you to sit with after this ends. Speech to you feels like a universal human thing. Like every person who has ever lived has done it the way you do it. They haven't. The speech you use, the inner monologue, the texting, The emails, the podcasts, the smart speakers, the headlines about other continents, that's not the universal version. That's a very specific, very recent culture of speech. It's roughly a few thousand years old in its written form, and just a few decades old in its digital form. The deeper version, the one our ancestors lived in, breath and face and fire and group, is 200,000 years old, maybe more. And it's still inside you. You use it every time you hug someone instead of texting them, every time you call instead of typing, every time you stop talking and just sit next to someone in the quiet. So the next time you catch yourself wondering when ancient humans learned to speak, flip the question. Ask instead, how much of the way they spoke have I already forgotten? Because their speech wasn't a tool. It was a culture. And every culture given enough time can be lost.